Second Minister for Home Affairs Josephine Teo says misinformation on the impact of drugs is rising and the community must work together to combat this. This comes as the global drug situation worsens, with some countries growing more tolerant towards recreational drugs like cannabis. As she cited a US study that said legalizing cannabis has had detrimental effects.
The study compared cannabis use between identical twins, but these identical twins lived in different states. One where cannabis use is legal, one where the cannabis use is still illegal. This study found that the twin living in the state where cannabis is legal used cannabis 20% more frequently than the twin who lived in a state where it is illegal. That's quite clear evidence. This points to the significant impact that legalization has on cannabis use.
Mrs. Teo was speaking at the Asia-Pacific Forum Against Drugs. Global leaders are at the forum to share best practices on drug prevention. It includes panel discussions where anti-drug advocates and NGOs exchanged views on addressing drug issues and challenges. Mrs. Teo says that it's crucial for governments and NGOs to work together towards a drug-free society.
And from all this, we're joined by Mr. Rogers Kasiri. Now, he's Vice President of the World Federation Against Drugs. Now, that's a multilateral community of non-governmental organizations and individuals that want to strengthen the prevention of and the recovery from drug abuse. Now, those are two very, very large problems. So to ask you what is the most difficult part of it, it's odd, but I shall begin by asking you, of the two, prevention, recovery, which is more difficult, and what is that greatest difficulty?
Recovery is very difficult because once you have been addicted to drugs and you have been affected, there are a lot of problems which come to the individual, which cause disability, ill health, but also the family where you belong, you disorganize them, they get disorganized. And it takes two. It takes the individual and the family to work together towards sobriety, to be sober, and it's quite lengthy. To live a drug-clean life, it takes a while. It takes a lot of time. That's why we are advocating for more investment in prevention, because we score more mileage, we save more money than when we incur a lot of money, doing treatment and recovery, and rehabilitation.
So prevention is key, but what we're seeing, Mr. Kasiri, is this drug issue becoming worse in a way globally. We're seeing that here in Singapore as well. It's been very difficult to control numbers. So what is behind this compulsive drug-seeking attitude in the first place?
One of the factors is that people are resorting to massive production, whether amphetamines, whether heroin, cocaine, so that they can get money. So they have to find consumers. The suppliers have to find the traffickers, the suppliers have to find consumers. And their biggest target is the young people. And as you know, the young people are the majority of the population. So if you get more young people consuming and going for drugs, then the market expands, you get more money. That's one of the reasons. But the other reason is that also our young people have not had enough information about the consequence and the negative effect which arose from the use of drugs. The other reason is that probably the enforcement arm of it, maybe there are some loopholes. They may not be, but once it's there, then the traffickers, find ways and the consumption will go up, and the consumption will go up. Right. But also there's...
Enforcement is one thing, but for young people to want to take drugs in the first instance, they must think first is not just acceptable, but it's a positive thing. What feeds the positivity of taking drugs?
There are two things which are a big challenge for us now. One of them is the peer, the friend, the peer influence, but also the social media, the internet, where they're promoting and seeing many messages which encourages trying of drugs and how you feel better, how you feel good. These are very key ingredients which we must address. And if the young people have not been given information early enough to be aware of the social media, whether Instagram, whether TikTok, all these other media we see encourage. And there has to be a counterbalance, which gives a balanced message about the effects and the dangers and the consequences. Because initially, many young people are trying and experimenting. They don't know the negative effect. And once you experiment, you get hooked. And once you are hooked, it's very difficult to
They
get
may
out.
not always get hooked. They may experiment, but...
And drop.
Yeah.
Actually, majority will drop, but a few will be caught in the net.
Right, and
to
it's those that really we're targeting. So how do you ensure that balance then that you've just mentioned, where you have all of these campaigns and this outreach and education, and you counterbalance that with, you know, this sort of the idea or the want to experiment?
Of course, the notion of prevention should be get them young, get them, catch them early, give them the information to be able to distill, to filter the messages which come, and also even to inquire, and even inform a parent that I'm being encouraged to do this. How do you see? Give them the information according to age. Don't overburden them. Don't use scare tactics, but give them the information such that when that issue, the challenge comes, that propensity that you must use drugs, then the young people will be able to question. Give them the skills, give them the knowledge, help them develop the negative attitude, and also compare them with those who have tried and see you are better off when you don't try. Because to stop is very, very demanding. You need a lot of energy, and it takes a whole village. But when you don't try, and you are better off yourself, you are healthy, your production will increase, you will have no criminal record, you will not be detained, you are better off in terms of treatment. And then you use those who are recovering to give them their message, but also use the community, use the law enforcement arm, and the medical people. I'm telling you, the young people will be better off.
I think you mentioned this word before, and I may have misheard it, but you suggested that they might have started to take it because in some way they were unhappy about something.
Yes, some of the other reasons.
That is a deeper thing that if you could fix. I mean, if I was deeply poor, I had no hope, I was very unhappy, and I had access to drugs that were affordable. I just think, oh, why not? What is the cost of my taking drugs?
And also, apart from the stress, the problems, but also in some families, they may also be using drugs, and that may attract them to use drugs. But others have a lot of problems at home, problems at school. Within the community setting also, there may be many users of drugs, and those are risk factors, which sometimes we need to address. Because you may not target the young person, but you may target those factors within the environment, which may increase the propensity to use what? To use drugs. And that's why when you talk about prevention, we don't only target young people, but we look at other factors. For example, poverty, marginalization, exclusions. You know, being able to cope with challenges and problems and not resorting to drugs, thinking that either drugs or alcohol will help you to overcome the problems. And this has been one of the biggest challenges. If you address them, then you find the propensity to use drugs will come down. And young people are going to be safe, are going to be healthy, are going to perform very well.
I mean, the difficulty is that once somebody is on that path to treatment, they may have to quite dramatically change their social circle, their entire life, because in order to cut off those connections with people who might be pushing drugs to them as well.
That's true, actually. People who end up using drugs cut off their contacts, their social system breaks down because of the stigma, because of the exclusion. In rehabilitation and in recovery, that's why we have to develop their social capital. Not only focusing at the individual, but the people around them, within the family, within the community, so that they can support. So you may have to change the entire community, the entire housing block, to be able to accept, to be able to support, and improve the young person's life, so that the young person is able to cope. I had good testimonies here in Singapore of young people who have recovered, who faced drug abuse problems. And I mean, those are the things we are advocating for, that they can work, young people can change, young people don't have to use drugs to solve problems, but also seek advice from an adult, which Sana and other Nakada have been doing. And for me, that's a good practice which needs to be promoted further.
Oh, thanks very much indeed for all that. Mr. Rogers Kasiri, Vice President of the World Federation Against Drugs.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.